Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back from the ad break. You are still watching Prime Live. My next guest is Brendon Petersen, a tech whiz who's staying ahead of the curve in a fast paced world of smartphones. From the Samsung Galaxy Flip to the Huawei Pura, Brendon will cover the latest devices and their features, including the cutting edge camera technology. So this is going to be a very quite interesting topic for us to delve into in terms of what's happening in the world of tech and exploring what these devices have to offer. Thank you so much for joining us, Brendon, on Prime Live, and welcome again.
Thank you always for having me.
Thank you so much. Now let's start with the foldable phones, specifically the Samsung Galaxy Flip. How does the Flip compare to traditional smartphones in terms of functionality, durability, and the battery life?
Yeah, so the last week or so has actually been quite an interesting week in tech. As you say, both Huawei and Samsung have both released devices. In Samsung's case, they held Unpacked, and that's where they unveiled the Galaxy Fold 7, or as they call it, the Galaxy Z Fold 7, and then the Galaxy Z Flip 7 and the Galaxy Z Flip 7 FE. And it's the last one of those that's actually the most interesting, the FE. But in terms of folding phones, I mean, we've heard about folding phones before. I don't think they're as unusual as they've been, over the last few years. But this year, what Samsung has done is they released a book fold. So those are sort of the larger ones, that sort of open vertically. And then, of course, there's the flip, which is a lot like those flip phones from back in the day. And what's different with these two is both of these devices are slightly larger in terms of, the outer display, the inner display, but noticeably they're mostly are thinner. And of course, when something's a lot thinner, you think it's going to be less durable. But actually, what Samsung has done is actually made these more durable than previous devices. And what's so interesting about it all is not even the Fold 7 or the Flip 7, but rather the Flip 7 FE, because I think one of the big things about these foldable devices is people have been saying, one, they're concerned about durability, but also the cost has also been very prohibitive. And the FE, which stands for Fan Edition, is actually now the first folding phone in South Africa available for under 19,000 Rand, which actually puts it on par with a lot of these sort of upper mid range. So like an Honor 400 Pro, and even more affordable than, a Vivo V series device or an Oppo Reno device.
Hmm. And now let's move on to the Huawei's latest release, the Huawei Pura. What are some of the standout features and innovation on this device, and what exactly can consumers look forward to?
So with the Pura series, this is the Pura 80. Pura used to be called the P series. So
Mm-hmm.
anyone who knows Huawei very well will know, there was things like the P8, P9, P10. We went as far as P60, and then they changed the name to Pura. That's actually why I was in Dubai last week for that global launch. And with Pura 80 series in South Africa, we're going to be getting Pura 80, Pura 80 Pro, Pura 80 Ultra. And what stands out with the Pura 80 Ultra as the sort of flagship out of this flagship series is it's got this dual switchable camera lens. So with the Pura 70 Ultra, what happened is they had an expandable or telephoto sort of camera lens where it could sort of pop out sort of zoom out. This one, what they've done is they've miniaturized all those components and instead done these two sort of different focal length lenses inside the actual glass. So in the actual camera bump, and it can actually swap between the two, which is the first of its kind. And as I said, I was at the global launch. There are a lot of very well-known people there. Sam Calder, one of the biggest travel content YouTubers on the planet, was there as well, talking about what he's done with the device. And even professional photographers were looking at some of these pictures, and they could not tell the difference between the pictures taken by the Pura 80 Ultra and an actual, proper camera, professional camera used. And I know in the past we've said that, smartphones are being very close to replacing cameras. But this time, I think for the first time ever, we're actually at the point where if even professionals cannot see the difference, I think Huawei really has pushed innovation to that point now where it's doing things that even I couldn't have imagined in my career.
Hmm. That's very impressive, and it leads me to my next question because we are living in a, obviously everybody's creating content, got a lot of influencers,
Mm.
people shooting content. It's something that's very popular for social media. And now, how has smartphone manufacturers adjusted their camera technology and built in editing features to cater to this trend? Because we can have a good camera, but we also need editing features in our phones, because then it also defeats the whole purpose to just have a good camera. So, do you think manufacturers are ahead of the game on this regard?
Yeah, there's that very popular saying that the best camera you have with you is the one in your pocket. And, when it comes to smartphones, I think, that's gradually become more and more true. But as you say, editing features are a major part of that. You know, a lot of what constitutes a good photo is, having a good eye, being able to frame a photo correctly, and then also being able to do things like color correct, and sort of edit and remove things or, do whatever you need to do. With both of these devices, obviously, AI is at the center of this. So, you've got AI features that can sort of correct for color, that can help you optimize what that picture looks like. You've got features where, let's say you go to a very popular landmark, there's always tons of people. You can't get a nice sort of clean shot. So you've got features that can actually remove people from those shots. If you are, for example, I was in the Burj Khalifa trying to take a picture of, the hotel I was staying at, and obviously you're trying to shoot through glass, you get that reflection. So with something like the Pura 80 Ultra, or even, with Samsung's Galaxy devices, there are now features where you can actually remove that reflection. So you get a sort of more seamless, more natural looking shot. So there's a lot of those features built in. But I think one of the key things that I find with the Pura 80 Ultra is their sort of stance seems to be, yes, everyone's turning to, software to be able to pull off these things, and obviously that has its place. But they're also still putting in the work to do the mechanical side of things. Because if you look at a proper professional camera, it's not filled with AI features. It's the glass, so it's the lens and it's the quality of the glass itself, but also the camera. So they're also focusing on those mechanical things, trying to miniaturize a lot of these things to be able to bring a lot of those features and sort of things to something that fits in your pocket, which no one else is actually really doing in the industry.
Mm. That's very impressive. A smartphone technology evolves at a breakneck speed. How do you think the user experience will change in the next coming years? Because I mean, how much can manufacturers do? And we're getting to a point where they're also, competing amongst each other to stay ahead of the game. So where do you see that going in the next few years?
I think it is going to get very interesting. I think a couple of weeks ago, let's say about a month or two ago, we saw Apple with Worldwide Developer Conference announce that they're going to be sort of redesigning the interface of the camera on the iPhones. So making it a lot cleaner, focusing on the things that people use the most with those other options there. And I think that is really what we are going to see. A lot more of these companies are going to turn to software to focus on, where are the platforms you're posting your stuff on? Is it social media? Is it TikTok? Is it Instagram? Are you focusing on video? Are you focusing on still photography? Those sort of things, and try to optimize for that. What I do think is very interesting, though, is some of the brands we haven't even spoken about that haven't released anything right now, but companies like Vivo, with the X200 Pro and X200 Ultra, which we don't have in South Africa, but we do have the Pro. Devices like that have even been used by National Geographic, to do, sort of certain things with. And obviously, National Geographic getting out in the wild, you need the best thing that you can get, and the fact that they found that that was good enough. Companies like Vogue have actually used devices to shoot their covers. If you look at certain movies, like the Formula One movie with Brad Pitt, that a lot of people have been talking about, that was actually filmed using iPhone cameras. The majority of that was filmed using iPhone cameras. The horror movie 28, I think it's 28 years later now is the latest iteration.
Mm.
Again, that was filmed, using iPhones. So it's not unusual for people to be able to use these devices that most of us have and actually create these very big epic things. I think we really are at the stage now where it is pushing the boundaries, but the boundaries really are around physical components, and people have complemented that with software.
Mm. And let's talk about the trends. Being someone that obviously you have knowledge on, different devices, and you've experienced, different devices and what they have to offer. What can consumers keep an eye on when it comes to, latest trends or trends that are about to come?
I think we're at a very weird stage in the sort of smartphone industry because there's been a lot of complaints of stagnation. Samsung,
Mm.
Apple, oh, everything looks the same. I've been one of those people saying exactly the same thing.
Yes.
I think if you look at something like the Fold 7 from Samsung, for example, it shows that they finally listen to people because by saying that a foldable is now thin and lighter, it just sounds like, oh, cool, it's thin and lighter, whatever. When you actually pick it up, when you hold it, there was a YouTuber, I think his name is Tom Chap, UK-based YouTuber, who'd been using the Fold 7 for a while. He said he'd forgotten that that was actually a folding phone and that he could unfold it because it felt lighter than his daily, phone that he used, which is an iPhone.
Mm.
And I think when you look at something like that, that it's now so light. I mean, I had it in my pocket at one stage and forgot that it was in my pocket, which is a great thing because now you've got something that can unfold and become the sort of canvas you need, and you're not worrying about, oh, it's weighing down whatever I'm carrying.
Mm.
So I think you're going to see some of those things continue to happen. Lighter, thinner is going to become even more of a trend. But I think we're also going to see, the continuing rise of the camera bump. If you look at Pure 80 Ultra, a lot of people have been saying to me that's probably the largest camera bump they've ever seen. And they're not wrong. But, I think what you're getting for that massive camera bump is something we would never have expected. So I think we're going to see larger camera bumps. Rumor for the iPhone 17 series is the largest camera bump they've ever done. So stretching across the back of the phone. So I think we're definitely going to see that. We're going to see thinner and lighter. We're going to continue to see faster charging. And I think from the Chinese companies, especially silicon carbon batteries. So, you'll have a phone size of an iPhone, for example, which will maybe have, say, a 4,000, 4,500 milliamp hour battery, which will get you through the day, but maybe not wonderfully. And then all of a sudden, you'll see a phone same size using silicon carbon technology for the battery, which will give you a 7,000, 8,000 milliamp hour battery. In fact, overseas, Honor's got something called the Honor Power, which I think has a 7,000 milliamp hour battery, if I'm correct. Which is the largest size battery I think we've ever seen in a phone, and I think we're going to see continued pushes in that. And I think the incumbents, the Samsungs, the iPhones, are going to be challenged by the Chinese. And I think the Chinese really are putting in a lot more effort to beat out the camera hardware, working with the partners they need to, but then also giving you better batteries, faster technology in terms of charging, longer software support, lighter phones and phones that could even fold and shift in different ways. I mean, you've got Huawei with the Mate XT, the triple fold. Samsung's confirmed that they will bring out a triple fold before the end of the year.
Mm.
And now there seems to be a patent from Huawei. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but a patent from Huawei that they might even do a quad fold device. So I think, it's about to start getting interesting again.
Mm. That sounds very, very impressive, and I'm really, really impressed with the Chinese market in terms of their production, not just only with phones, because I feel like they do overdoing everything in terms even cars,
Yeah.
technology. They just like taking over the market, which is a good thing because I think they represent quality also at a very affordable price, also so beating the market, and that's very, very something that we need. But Brendon, this has been such a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much for joining us and for giving us your time.
Thank you so much for having me in.
Thank you so much, viewers at home. That was Brendon Petersen, who is a tech expert who was just giving us insight on cell phones and camera technology and what to expect in terms of trends within the cell phone industry. But without wasting any time, let's go to a quick break. We'll see you right after this.